you talked about auto, you talked about inventories in auto, and government is also ensuring that there are supply side incentives. So the PLI for auto and the auto companies is likely to be extended by 1 more year, Kartik.
You know, the beauty of that always is that no matter how much you discount through PLI schemes, through any other incentivization for manufacturing services, SEZs, tech parks, whatever you may call it, you know, the challenge always is that whenever there is a scheme, a subsidy offered by the government to an industry, that subsidy is not coming out of money that RBI is printing afresh. That subsidy is always coming by way of us, the middle class, paying taxes. So, you know, I like to keep coming back to the whole tax story, because that is where the fiscal deficit or the fiscal prudence or the fiscal stimulus really comes from. So, there are taxes. Now, the point is you invest or incentivize investments in, let's say, a sector like auto, where of course the trigger is that this PLI scheme, which was to be valid for 5 years, is now actually valid for 6 years because it hasn't picked up in the last financial year, and the government has given that 1 year extension to the PLI scheme. Krishna has all the details, he'll tell us. But the point really being that these investments being made by the government to incentivize more production seldom translates to cars getting any cheaper, smartphones getting any cheaper, any other SEZ, tech park, whatever you may call it, any of these incentives, tax holidays, a 1:1 investment made by the government, cheaper access to land, cheaper access to labor markets, however you incentivize it, all this money that the government invests by virtue of these PLI schemes goes from the coffers of the exchequer, which are filled month on month, year on year by the taxpayers, right? Corporate taxpayers as well as, you know, direct taxpayers, like individuals like us, and of course the GST collection, indirect taxes, all of that. But the point is that these investments are great for the GDP. They are great for employment generation. They are great for overall capex investments, which is what they are targeted towards. Reduces the burden on the government to keep building highways and keep building roadways and keep building airports, because you need to have the momentum of investments in the economy going for the GDP to grow. But the point is they seldom translate to cars getting any cheaper for the end consumer.
Items getting any cheaper, but a 26,000 crore PLI for another year for auto companies, does that mean there'll be more takers?
The way Kartik explained it, it's more, to put it really simply, the timing has been extended by a year simply because so far around 10,750 crore rupees is what has actually been invested under the PLI scheme. So what they're essentially doing is giving themselves more time, because the allocation of, to be exact, 25,938 crore rupees. That's the total allocation for the PLI auto scheme. There are different PLI schemes that we have in this country, from electronics manufacturing to auto manufacturing. PLI auto, which is for the auto sector, the total outlay is 25,938 crore rupees, which is nearly 26,000 crore rupees. To make sure that that entire money is invested or given out to companies for auto production, it's essentially the government giving themselves another year to make sure that the entire money gets, you know, disbursed to the companies. And bear in mind, this, in a sense, from my understanding, is an outcome of some serious lobbying by the auto sector with the powers that be with the Indian government. Because not only have they managed to get this 1 year extension, the government has also promised quarterly disbursement of those subsidies, which wasn't the case before, which would help in cash flow management hugely for all these companies. So there is going to be quarterly disbursement of subsidies. And also, under the scheme, you get the subsidy only when you have at least 50% of domestic value addition to what you're making, or DVA. So, and there are a couple of agencies which test and tell a company whether they have met that criteria or not. Exactly 2 so far. But after this lobbying, which I call as lobbying, what has now happened is that number of testing agencies goes up from 2 to 4. They're doubling the number of testing agencies. They're giving out subsidies every quarter. And they're essentially making sure that the idea with which they set out to do this, which on the 1st of April 2022 is when the scheme began, during the last financial year, they finish it. Now, all this means is that it's relief, joy and boost for the auto sector. for another year. It sort of reminds me of the scheme that was given to IT sector once
Right,
upon a time,
exactly.
when they kept extending it by a year, saying that, oh,
Can
take it.
Since we talked about lobbying, and Tesla has been trying to lobby, and hopefully Tesla has been trying to get that PLI scheme. Under the new extension, will Tesla be made eligible if it comes into India?
If it manufactures in India, I think
Right.
the rule
With
is
50%
clear.
localization,
Yes.
if it's
But
able
there
to
are-
meet that norm.
Absolutely. So I think like what happened with the FAME subsidy, you know, the whole challenge always is around localization. Why hasn't, okay, let's look at PLI in its entirety. 1.97 lakh crores, I think, was the total outlay on PLI. About 26,000 crores allocated for the auto sector. That is, give or take, what, about 1/8 of the total outlay on through PLI dedicated to the auto sector. Now, the auto sector, of course, has not seen much incentive in taking on that PLI in the last 1 year, and what you said, just about 10,000 crore rupees or something has actually been picked up by the auto sector. Of course, there is advantage for the auto sector to invest in creation of ancillary industries through MSMEs who can localize whatever the auto companies are procuring from outside India right now. But they don't find it in their interest right now, it seems, given the numbers, that that they've been able to make any headway in that localization, and hence they've been looking at the PLI scheme with some sort of suspicion that I don't want to take that subsidy and then 3 years later realize that the MSMEs that I contracted work to have not been able to give me quality. I am losing customers, my prices are going up because I stopped importing, and now I import at a higher price because my order value has come down with those importers, and hence I am beginning to lose, and because I lose, I reduce the localization, and then the government comes after me, hey, I paid you subsidy, give it back to me. Right. So
Nobody
it's
wants
a
that.
catch-22. So
Absolutely.
PLI or any scheme, when you make it, I think, that's the challenge. I think since you're
it's a very
talking about
big one.
localization, I have a big problem when we talk about even brands like, let's say, Decathlon,
Okay.
Miniso. These are brands, I'm taking these names, fully conscious that these are brands that came into India through an FDI route, and they started selling in India. Excellent pricing, excellent quality. And honestly, look what has happened 3 years or so into the business when they started localizing. Look at the difference between the Make in India tag products and those which are not made in India. I mean, Decathlon t-shirts, you put them for 2 cycles of wash and those t-shirts are gone forever. I use them to clean my cars, obviously. So, there's a problem with any scheme that you roll out. It has to be sustainable for the long run. It is not something that will only look at a vested interest that I want manufacturing to take off, I want MSMEs to mushroom, I want manufacturing to happen, ignoring the quality that Indian consumers who are paying money to buy those products deserve. So the focus has to be as much on quality as on, of course, the jingoism around making in India and creating jobs.
And especially if you want to continue exporting. And there, the quality checks are going to be much far greater than the ones you're going to be selling within India.
And